Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us in the series of Forge Dev Den, where we learn about app development using Forge. My name is Anmol Agrawal, and I've been a developer advocate here at Atlassian for 5 years. My job here is to inspire and help app developers like yourself to build solutions using our tools. If you'd like to connect with me, please feel free to reach out to the Go link mentioned here, which is go.atlassian.com/da-anmol. Which will direct you to my LinkedIn profile. With that, let's get started building app for asset management using Forge. So we'll first begin with an introduction to asset management with an example. We'll try to understand what's in it for customers, what's in it for developers like you, and what kind of data can be used in asset management. Once we have an idea of what's and the whys, we'll jump into the hows of building an app. We'll start from scratch. We'll see some code and live demos. So this will be a technical deep dive. To cap it off, I'll share tons of resources that you will need to get started building your own app and taking it to the completion. And of course, we'll take some questions from you at the end of this session. With that, let's get started. Many of you might not be aware of what asset management is, so let's try to understand that with an example. Let's assume there is a bakery, and this bakery has a bunch of items like a couple of mixers, an oven, even a few pies. All these items are usually connected to each other through some processes or workflows. In this example, there are 2 mixers which will pass the batter to an oven, and out comes 2 delicious pies. But what if a mixer broke? That will have an impact on the output of the bakery. So in this example, if a mixer broke, we are having one less pie. So in this case, that's a cut of 50% in production. So using this example, we'll try to understand 2 concepts: asset management and configuration management database, or also known as CMDB. Now I can give a long technical definition of both of them, but I'll try to keep it simple to understand and remember. Asset management is like an inventory list to keep track of all the stuff a business owns, like mixers, ovens, and pies. CMDB tracks all those things that are connected to each other. So in this case, is the first workflow from mixer to the pie. So the only data that you can store is not just a bakery items, but you can store all sorts of information, like people information, for example. What devices do individuals have? What are their attendance or leave balance? Other one is the facilities, like bakery is one example. Another one is you can store inventory information, or also the information about a fleet of drivers or vehicles. And the thing that you can import is the practices. So we saw in the case of a bakery that there's the workflow between the items. Nowadays, pretty much every processes have their own workflows. You can bring in those too. And there's a lot more that you can bring in apart from what I have already mentioned. So you can imagine this opens up all sorts of opportunities for you as a developer as to what kind of data you want to bring into JSM assets. In doing so, we are reducing the number of tools and systems needed in an organization. This reduces costs, streamlines processes, avoid latencies and errors, which arises from juggling multiple tools, because these data are distributed in all different directions in various software, various instances. Lastly, for the employee themselves, it reduces the cognitive load by centralizing the work into a single system that easily integrates with one another. A system that uses consistent terminology and setups, which ultimately helps them to efficiently deliver their best work. So now we have understood at the high level what asset management looks like. We'll jump into the building the Forge app. So let's take an example, real world use case. In this case, we are going to demonstrate the power of Forge in enhancing JSON asset management capabilities. So imagine a situation where an organization has a wealth of hardware assets, and each of those hardwares is associated with multiple files. So these files could be maintenance records, warranty documents, software configurations, or any other relevant data file. Now, this data resides in external systems outside of JSM. Building an app for assets is a bit different than building for Jira and Confluence. Therefore, let's see how to think about it first. When building an app for asset, it's crucial to start by conceptualizing data models. Think of it as customizing a solution to fit your unique organizational needs. So this approach allows you to define and structure your asset data in most effective way for your business processes. In the next step, we focus on the data types. It's about identifying whether we are dealing with people, end user devices, IT infrastructure, or any other information. Understanding these data types is key as it shapes our database structure and our interaction with the data. Equally important is recognizing the relationships among these data types. For example, how does an end user device connect to a person? Determining whether these relationships are one-to-one, one-to-many, or many-to-many is vital for an efficient and effective data model. Lastly, let's talk about data mapping. This is where we bridge the gap between where our data is stored and how it's represented in our assets within JSM. Data mapping involves linking data fields to your external database corresponding fields in JSM assets. So it's not just about moving data from point A to point B. It's about ensuring that data is translated correctly, maintaining its integrity and meaning in the new environment. So effective data mapping ensures that when you look at an asset in JSM, you are seeing a complete, accurate, and up-to-date representation of the data from your external systems. Now that we have understood what all should be kept in mind while building the app, let's see how the workflow of importing data into JSM assets look like. So far we have understood what asset management is, what are the use cases, what kind of data that we can bring in, how it benefits you as a developer and your customers. We also saw how to start thinking about building the app. And lastly, what we are doing is taking a bird's eye view of how this workflow looks like. And understanding this is important because once we understand this, building an app would be much easier. So in the first step, we create an import source in assets and generate a container token. And this token is crucial as it will be provided to the Forge app that's handling the import. This step is automatically taken care of the authorization and authentication in Forge. Before starting the import, it's vital to submit the schema and the mapping configuration. This step defines how the external data will be structured and related within assets. Without this, the import would report a missing mapping status and halt the process. And this probably is the most, you can say, the challenging or the difficult part of building the app. Because once this part is taken care, everything that falls after this is much easier. Once the Forge app verifies the container token and mappings are in place, Assets responds with dynamic links. So there's all sorts of links that we provide. There's a link to start an import, and the link is to get the status of an import. There's another one for canceling the import. So these links are essential for continuing the workflow, serving as pathways for data imports and other related actions. With the mapping set, we are ready to start the import. This is initiated by the external app, making a post request to the start import URL, which is one of the dynamic links which is generated in the previous steps. It's this moment when the data begins its journey into the assets. Next phase involves Forge app submitting data. which it has imported from external sources, and also reports progress of the job. It's a critical stage where actual content gets transferred, ensuring that JSM asset is populated with new data. And finally, the Forge app confirm the successful completion of the import, marking the end of the data migration process. So we have gone through the theoretical part of this session. Now let's jump into the code. But before that, I'll just quickly check the chat if there's any question. Nothing yet. All right, that's fine. All right, cool. Let's continue. Let's go it up. So what I'm going to do is jump to my terminal. And I'm going to create a new app. So we'll start with Forge create. Oh, couple of key pointers. JSM Assets is available in the premium and the enterprise edition of JSM Cloud. So you can get a trial version of it. I think it's valid for 30 to 45 days, something like that. So yes, that's an important call out. In this case, let's name the app as Forge Dev 10. Now we've got to select the template. We'll go into the show all and look for, there's tons of templates. All right, so we are looking for this particular one, which is Jira Service Management Assets, import type, and this one uses the UI kit to develop the UI. Good, hit enter. This is download the template. And if you have already built an app before with Forge, I think this step should look familiar. All right, so we have created the app. Jump into this. So first of all, let's look into the manifest file. In the manifest file, we have a module which is special to assets. It's called assets import type. If you have worked with Forge modules before, so this allows us to define different parts of the app and how they are connected to each other. So in this case, right out of the template, we get a couple of functions that we can see, as I previously mentioned in the workflow. We can see some functions for deleting import, starting import, stopping import, checking the import status, and they are mapped to some functions in the index file, which we'll look into shortly. And another important thing to note, there's a special permissions to call the REST APIs in JSM assets, and it's called import configuration CMDB. So if you check out our documentation, you will see that mentioned in every REST APIs of assets. So with that, let's jump into the index.jsx. And with the basic boilerplate that we have, let's try to deploy this app and see how it looks. So what we are going to do is, first of all, deploy this app. So this is going to package the app and upload it to the cloud. Should complete anytime. Let's see. All right. So we have deployed it. Now we are going to install it in our cloud instance. So I'm going to enter the URL for my instance, which is sunmol3.atlassian.net. It asks me if I would like to continue with the scopes mentioned. In this case, yes. All right, the app is installed. And let's also do the tunneling. If you are not aware of the tunneling, what it does is connect the local app code to the app installed in the cloud instance. I'm going to share the link in the chat on how to where you can find information about on how to do that, and we do that using ngrok. So I have a YAML file in my system where the ngrok auth token is mentioned. I'm just going to mention that here using forge settings set ngrok config path, and then I'll define the path to the YAML file where ngrok's configurations are mentioned. With that, we will now be able to do forge tunnel. All right, tunneling is ready, app is deployed. Let's try it out. So I have the assets page open here. The first step that I'm going to do is create a schema. So let's say I'm going to use this IT asset management template, and I'll use this template, and let's say I have a company called XYZ. Create some schema. I decide to create some schemas in this. I'll jump into the schema configuration. So here's where we will do most of the work of importing the data. So here we go into the import tab, and we jump into the create import. All right, so we are not, let me just cross check in the manifest file what the name should look like. So forge dev 10. All right, this is not visible here. Just let me double check what is wrong. Let me just reinstall it again. All right, so it's saying that it is already installed. So let me check. Okay, I think I missed it seeing this at the down. So we have forge dev 10. Let's define this import structure because this one is about importing the hardware information. So I'll call it hardware import. All right, so first time we have installed this app and we are trying to import something, so it will, and we have introduced a new scope. It's going to ask for us for the permission. So what I'm going to do is access to this app to be able to allow the app to read import structures and import data into assets. So yes, I accept that.
Anmol, sorry to cut you.
Yeah.
Hi everyone. As part of the house rule number 1, kindly double check your mic and put them on mute. Sorry, Anmol, go on.
No worries. Thank you so much, Anne. Thank you so much, everyone. All right, let's continue. So we have created a import. What I'm going to do next is so we can see it's ready to run. But first of all, we have to configure the app. And right now, we just see a hello world message. So quickly trying to jump into the slide to explain what I'm trying to do here. I'll jump back to this one. So this one, first step of generating and verifying the access token is already taken care by the Forge. What I am currently going to work next on is the submitting schema of the data and the mapping, creating mapping configuration. We have you can see the Hello World app of the Assets app working. All right. Now, next, what I'm going to do is jump into the code, and index.jsx file is the main file that will be mainly working. So I'll just hide this sidebar. All right, let's get started. So first thing that I'm going to do is this bunch of UI components and API NPM packages to make the API call. That's what I'm going to use. So I will first of all define all of that here. Just comment this out for now. So I'm importing something, render, text field, some buttons. This asset app import type configuration, this is a special one, which I'll talk about shortly. Then we have some table elements. We have packages to make API calls, and I have a sample data set that I'm going to use to import it into the assets. So this will act as if you have a data in some external sources and you want to fetch it via an API. So this is a sample data set that I'll create and will be using ahead. There are some other code that you can see in this boilerplate, like controller resolver and worker resolver. I'll get to this at the last of at the end of this session and speak briefly about what it is. So next, what we are going to do is first of all create the UI of so that the users can define the schema and the mapping. Because there's ton of code here, even to just build basic simple app to import hardware and file information, just to speed up the process. I'm going to copy paste some code, but it's all very well commented, and I'll go through, I'll walk you through like what's happening in that code. So that will save us a lot of time. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, look for, so here is the step where the UI that we just saw, the model window, that is defined. So I'm going to replace this with this. So just don't be scared. It's pretty simple once you understand what's happening here. So I'll take you through. So here's where it begins. First of all, we are getting some some data about the import ID and the workspace ID where it's happening. So once that's done, actually before going further into this, I have one more slide to actually make this simpler to understand what I'm trying to do. So here's the source data, which is the sample data that I'm going to use. Here we have, you can see some hard drives. Each hard drive have attributes like ID and label. And there's another object type called files, which is, you can say, a child object of the hard drive. And the file itself has an attribute called path and size. So this is, you can imagine this data being residing in an external source. And let's say it's coming via an API. So what we are trying to do in this step is trying to create this mapping. And this is a very minified version to help us understand like what does the mapping look like. So there are two key aspects of it. First is the object schema. In this, we define the schema of the objects that is about to come inside assets. So we are defining object type hard drive. It has an attributes called disk label. And this is how it would look like inside the asset. And type is text. The hard drive object type has a children, which will be called file. And the file itself has attributes called path and size. And path is text, size is integer. So there are certain some data types that is supported by assets. So all this information about the data types and how to define this mapping, we have it all documented. I'll share the resource at the end. So we have looked into the how to define the object schema inside the assets. Next important thing is to define the mapping. So mapping is, okay, what you have already created inside the assets. Now, how is the external source is mapped to what we just defined in right above. So in this, I have given an example of object type mappings. Inside that, we are looking for object type name hard drive, which we just defined here above. And we are mapping its attributes first. So you can say attribute name disk label, which we defined above. And there's other key called attribute locators, which is label. And this label refers to the label, this key that you can see in the source data. I'll repeat it again. In the mappings, we have the object type name hard drive, which we defined above here. Attributes mapping. Now we are about to map the attributes. First is the disk label, which also we defined here. And now we want to map this disk label to the label in the source, and we do that using a key called attribute locators. So you can imagine this whole defining the object schema and mapping to look like a long JSON object. And that's why I said before that this is the most difficult step in this whole process. But once you get past this, everything is much easier. So jumping back into the code. So what I'm trying to do is I'm creating a form. I'm how to add attributes. And this section includes how to add attributes in this form. This section is about how to add children in the inside the form. So I'll show the form shortly, how it looks like. And once this form is submitted, how the what process will take place after that. I'm just going to briefly open up this sample data. This is going to show how that form data looks like. So here's the example that I talked about. In this example, I'm talking about hardware having many files. So all of this looks scary, but it's not. So for the time being, I'll just minimize it and I'll show how it looks like in the form. Next up, what I'm doing is transform data. I have this function called transform, which I think I have it handy here. Yeah, I'll just share shortly. But what transform is doing is basically this. So I have a form where I've submitted the data and that is being turned into the mapping JSON object. So transform is basically, as the name says, it's a function that is transforming the form data into the JSON object as expected by the mapping API. So next I am going to do is, all right, for that, I'll just explain this particular part. So here's the API. Once we have this transform data, which is the JSON object of the mapping and the object schema, I'm just making a put call to this API endpoint. If you can help me share the link to the CDAC post. So it has the link to all the resources. So it has also the link to the REST APIs. So we have this API endpoint to create the mapping, and we are making the put request and passing on this transform data as the payload. Thank you so much, Anne. All right, moving on. Once we have that, and this is so this part was like once we have the form data, what all operations need to take place. And this part is defining the UI. So you can see some text field, some headings, some table elements. So all that stuff. And before let's seeing the form, how it looks like, I will also add some helper functions. Now, it all looks scary, but it is actually not, as I've already said it. So this is a simple transform function. And this is another helper function that I have created, which we'll use later on, something called extract execution ID. I'll explain what that is a while later. Okay, so we have, what we have done so far is create a form and be able to create a mapping. We should be able to create a mapping. Let's give that a try. I'll do a quick refresh. We have the hardware import. It's ready to run. All right. When I click on the edit mapping, there's no mapping as of yet. Let's do configure app. Hey. So now you can see this form, although not pretty and maybe not even the best way to go about schema, but hey, it's visual and it's easy to understand, but I'm sure you guys can come up with a better approach. So if you guys come up with a better approach, please do let me know. I'm not going to fill up the form, means maybe fill up a few fields here, like, okay, this name is hardware. Oh, sorry. Let me check again. What was it? Hard drive. Okay. Hard drive and the file. So this could be hard drive. Selector is ID. I have to see what attributes will be. And here's the way you can add more attributes. And you can see how the behavior, it's dynamic, and that's why it's a lot of code. Here's, you can see for the children. You can also add child attributes. Rather, filling up this form manually, it would take me a long while. So rather, I've hard-coded that, and that hard code is what? Where is it? This sample data. So this is the hard-coded. So just make things a bit quicker. I have this handy. All right, so what I'm basically going to do is just clear up this form, configure the app, and just save the configuration, and it will pick up that data that I have hard-coded. All right, let me do a quick refresh to check if we have mapping in place or not. All right, as you can see, now we have hard drive and file objects. And if you look into the attributes mapping, so you can see that we have two columns, data source field and destination attribute. So data source field is what it is going to pick up from the data source. So this is how those fields look in the data source. And destination attribute is, okay, this is how it will look inside JSM asset. So that's what it is. Similarly for the file, in the original data source, it looks like path with the uncapitalized, and the destination attribute that is capitalized, and same for the size. All right, just revising from the workflow we saw before. So we have been able to submit the schema, and we have created mapping configuration. And as I said, this is the most difficult step of all of this. And once that is done, actually we can do all the other steps in one go. But still, let's take it one by one. All right. So what I'm going to do next is, I think we have a function called import status. Yes. So what import status, I have a code for that. Let me paste that first and then I'll explain what it does. Okay, let me actually do a wrap. Okay, now, first of all, we are getting the import ID and the workspace ID. This is pretty much required in almost every API call that we are going to make. These are some of the context parameters that is needed in every URL, as you might be noticing. So we have this URL called config status. Now, what config status does is, actually, I should have done this before, but anyways, it's fine. I'll just create another import to show what how this works. But what it does is, based on the presence or the absence of the mapping, so it returns the status of a mapping configuration. So there is a possibility that mapping is absent at all. So this is what missing mapping is for. And if the mapping is missing, it should return that, okay, it is not configured. If there's mapping is present, but there's no import executions or import tasks are going on, we can say the status would be idle and we can show it is ready. So we just saw that it is ready to run. So this corresponds to the ready status. What are the other status that's possible? So once, let's say an import task is ongoing, it could be in the running status. The possible status is like status is import is execution, import is disabled at all. In this case, I have just handled not configured and ready, but it's easy to implement the running and disable too. Okay, we have the import status ready. All right, and what we are going to do the next is define the sample data. I am going to do in here and create a new file, and I'm going to call this sample-data.jsx. And I'm going to paste this code. It is just a very simple JSON object. As you can see, it has hard drives, which is a array. Each hard drive has an ID and label, and it has some children called files, and each of those files have paths inside, as we saw earlier. Okay, now we have done the, we have defined the import status, we have created object schema, we have defined mapping configuration. Now, let's begin the fun part, which is starting the import. I have this code handy here with me. So I'm going to just, to make it easy, actually there is a start import function. Yes, so template already gives us this function, which saves me so much time. I am going to do is paste this code, and I'm going to explain what's happening here. So beginning, as usual, we have the import ID and the workspace ID. After that, I'm going to make an API called executions. Now, what is this executions? If we go back to our slide, we talked about this dynamic links for import. So what are these dynamic links? Okay, starting the import, getting the status of an import execution, or canceling an import. So all this information, it comes in this API called executions. And we'll look into the console log how that looks like. So we're making the post request, getting the response, which this is what we are going to look at. We have the data set. We just created sample data file. We have the sample data. And the next step that comes into is submitting the data. Again, jumping back into this one, we just the link that we'll get from the dynamic links, we are going to start the import, and then we are going to submit the data. So what I'm talking about here is submitting the data. We'll see there's a URL called submit results. Let me first explain this and then I'll give the demo of this. After the data is submitted, which is, so here's the submit URL, and here's the extract execution ID. Right now, there's a little bit of gap in the APIs that execution ID is not available as easily as like getting an import ID or workspace ID. And that's what I'm trying to I've created a hack around using this function, which is I provide the URL, and from that URL, I'm extracting the execution ID. And because that is going to be useful in the next couple of API calls that we are going to make. Here we are in this function, which we are about to define. I think we are not, it's not to pass on this sample data that we just created and pass on some context parameters, which will be used in the API call, just like this that we are making here. Once all the data is submitted, we have to let the app know, okay, let's finish the import. And that will be done by a function called complete import. And I'll explain how that works. So far, pretty easy. We have started import, get our URLs, get executions. From that, we get the URL to submit the data. Once we submitted the data, we make another API call to let them know, let the app know that, okay, import is over. What I'm going to do next, and these are actually the last two parts, and the app is finished, it will be working. So the last two parts are, one, we have a function called submit data, and what it looks like is we got the sample data. We have put it in the format that the API expects. Then we are going to make an API call. In this, we are making use of the context parameters we originally passed: workspace ID, import ID, execution ID, and this one ends with /data. This is the submit data or submit results URL. And the data we got, we are passing that down as a payload. So we have submitted the data. Now the last step is to let this know that the import is complete. And we are going to do that using a function called complete import. In the complete import, the only difference between this and the submit data API call is the body, which is completed is true. This will let the API know that import is finished. So that was a lot. Let's go through it once again. Where's the start import? We first of all get the execution. Actually, I'll run the show the app first and then revise it. We are going here. Quick refresh. Okay, it's ready to run. Fingers crossed. Let's see. Data. Okay. No notification. All right, let's double check. Hey. Okay, maybe it was too quick to even notify me. Huh, interesting. So we can see that in this imports history that an operation happened successfully in less than 0.5 seconds. Impressive. And in this import, we have imported 10 hard drives, and let's see how many files we got. 30. And yes, as per the original sample data, that's how many hard drives and files we had. Just to double check all of this, in the sidebar, now we have a new object types called hard drives and files. And as you can see, we have the hard drive ID, if you remember, and the file should have a path and the size. Maybe I'll have to add another column, but that should also be there. Yeah, just confirming about the file object type. We have these attributes and we have the size there. Okay. So in the last step, we saw we were able to start import, submit data, and let the app know that, okay, it's time to complete the import. And that's pretty much it. And here's the Go link of all the resources. There are tons of resources on this topic. There's lots of tutorials and guides around this. So you can go check out this go.atlassian.com. This will direct you go.atlassian.com/forge-dev-10-assets. Sorry, it's long, but it will direct you to the post from our developer community. So you can go to that thread, ask questions, give feedback. Our product team will be on top of it. And you will also get notified about the recordings for this session. The app that we developed, you will also see the repo for the sample app that we just developed. Okay, let's take some questions.
Yep. Thanks, Anmol. It's really good. So any questions, folks? I see that, yeah, this is the biggest attendance that we have. But oh, sorry, you were saying?
Hey, Sanket.
Hey folks, good afternoon, good evening. Yeah, one quick question for you, Anmol. First of all, awesome demo. It was really helpful. A follow-up question on what you showed. So can we create attributes which are basically pointing to another schema's object types? And if yes, can objects be imported, which will have like pointers to the objects from the other object types through that attribute?
All right, let me try to repeat the question. Or maybe you
Cross
can try to.
schema references. Cross
schema references. That is a good question. I haven't tried it, but I would love to try it out and then I can let you know. But I'll note down the question, and in that community thread, I can get back to you from what I find.
Sounds good. I have put in a comment in chat as well, so maybe you can pick that up.
All right, awesome. Thank you.
Another question, Anmol, how about attachments? So if I have to push data along with metadata, can I push attachments?
Attachments in the resources, quickly, we have resources of what kind of data structures are supported. I'm going to just open up for everyone. So what are the data that's supported? We have text, Boolean, integer, this. Yeah, attachment, I don't think so, because I think it can be pretty heavy for this, for asset management. But what could be the workaround? I'm thinking about it, but let's say assets fields are accessible inside Jira. I mean, I'm talking about the Jira core. So inside any Jira ticket, you will be able to add an attachment, and that Jira ticket can be linked to a asset ticket, not asset ticket, but asset object. So indirectly, I think it should be possible. But good question, something I haven't tried out.
Okay, yeah. Basically, objects also have attachments option on UI, but APIs are pretty limited. So just wanted to understand using this export process or import process, can that be achieved? But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Also in that team thread, in the community thread, there will be engineers and product managers from the JSL assets team. So you can ask there also, and they can get back to you and maybe give even a better explanation than me on this.
Yeah, thank
Cool.
you.
Thank you, Sanket. Is there a limit of how many nested objects can be created? Actually, yes. And we have a page on that too. Just quickly opening it up. All right. So what are the, as per the latest update, there's limit to 1 million schema objects, but also keeping in mind the complexity of those objects. If they are more deep and there are like many attributes, then the limit would be less than 1 million. So that is something that should be kept in mind. And but we are also continuing to work to increase this limit, and as we continue to upgrade, this page will be updated.
So one basic question again, Anmol. If you can go back to your previous page, I think you have a list of what objects can be imported, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the documentation page, yes. One pretty common practice that I've seen is people try to import their own icons and assign those icons to object types or objects itself, right? So can we import icons using this process, or that is not supported today?
As of today, I don't think that is supported, but that seems to be a good use case. So I think that could become like a feature request.
Okay.
But yeah, that's a good call out.
Okay, we
Right.
still have 2 minutes left, and I think we can still accommodate a couple more questions.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I will open up the community post.
Okay, any questions? Going, gone? Okay. I guess,
one question again.
okay. Sure, no
From
worries.
importing point of view, Anmol, a couple of dependencies that I can think of, especially around the reference types and statuses. So during that import process, what you showed, can reference types be imported, or whatever custom reference types are to be created, can those be imported?
Types. Reference types, you meaning the relationships?
Yes. So when you create an attribute, you have to specify what type of reference it is. And
Correct.
typically you have to create it at the schema level, right? So
Actually, let me quickly check, because the engineering team has been working on this fast. They might already have it and I may have missed it. So I'm just quickly checking if we have anything like that.
at least APIs, I didn't find anything for
Okay.
creating reference types. So that
Got it.
was another question. So because import will break, because typically what people will do is they will have attributes referring to other object types, as in cross-reference schemas, or even same schema, but there has to be a reference attached to it, and if the
Yeah.
proper reference is missing, then it may not work.
That's another good feature, actually. I would like to check with with the engineering team if they have thought about this. That's another good feature.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'll look into it. Can we schedule the imports from third-party tool, or do we need like import data? Yes, for that, that's the good question. We have a guide called Using Async Events API to queue jobs to import objects into assets. Is it visible in my screen? Yeah. So this is the page that we have. And this is specifically for the use case that is for the question asked by Maho, if I'm pronouncing it correct, Maho Francis. So yeah, because the Forge function has only a window of 55 seconds, which if there's a long running task, it is not that's not good enough. So you can use this async events API to queue this up, and also schedule should also be possible with this. Yeah.
Okay, thanks everyone. I think we're 2 minutes over time. So before we go, I'd like to remind everyone that we're gonna send out a post-event survey. So kindly answer those so that we can improve this type of events moving forward. And with that, thanks Anmol, it's been really nice. And don't forget to connect with Anmol if you have any other questions, or post your questions on the developer community.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a nice day, everyone.